In a previous video entitled Software Architecture, we talked about AisClient as the Raven Marine Support software module that gets data from the AIS transponder and decodes it and sends it to AisClient, which integrates it with the local GPS receiver and vessels from the internet, and then sends that on to the charting program for display to the pilot. Typically, the AisClient software module is minimized, and it's on the taskbar here. The pilot doesn't typically look at it. However, it provides a lot of good debugging diagnostic capabilities for the pilot or Raven technical support people. This is an important box right here, the COM port select. You can select where the data comes from. It can be coming from a BPI, which is the case right now. We got Bluetooth COM port 49 selected. Or it could be a hardwired serial port. Or if you select this radio button here, it could be a WPI, which is over Wi-Fi and uses UDP. So you select the one you want there. Typically, that's pre-configured, and you don't have to look at it. We didn't use the standard Windows resize and close buttons because we didn't want the pilot to accidentally close this particular software module. If you look at View, Serial Data coming from the transponder, you can see the raw AIS data, which is the data that begins with an exclamation mark. And you can also see data coming from the BPI that has information about the battery and performance and some other parameters. Let's close that. This particular window here would let you single step through a log file that you had previously recorded. So if you were looking for a particular record type, you could find it by single stepping. So you do, like, open the file, and it would, when you open the file, it would show the first record in one of these panes here, and then you could get next, get previous, go step back through it, and so forth. So that can be a nice debugging tool there. If you're looking for a particular problem, if a Raven technical person were looking for a particular problem in a raw file, this might be very useful to to turn that raw file into something human readable that you can read down here in these display panes. Here's this window, shows the raw AIS messages. Down here is the message type. VDM is a remote messages. VDO is your own vessel message. And typically a position record is being displayed. One is message ID 1 is a position record. There's a 3. And message ID 3 is a certain type of position record. And then a type 5, there's a 5, is a vessel static information. There's another one. And so moving on, here's a checkbox. In order to process AIS Class B messages, that must be checked. You can pause the data pane with this checkbox. And here's the baud rate of the data coming out of the PPI port. This particular window here shows the number of seconds since the last message was received from the transponder. So if you stopped receiving messages from the transponder, this counter would count up. This window here shows the status of the RAIM flag, which says RAIM is not being used by the GPS receiver in the transponder. And that's also shown here. There it is, the RAIM flag. RAIM is not a topic we're going to get into here, but it can be used, there for, if you just had an interest in that particular aspect of the AIS transponder, you could find it right there. This is very useful, this pane here on the left. The VDO message appears here, and it's very useful for diagnostics. For example, if you had trouble with heading, you want to know if heading's coming out of the AIS transponder, you look right here, and that right shows 318 degrees, so it is coming out. If it were 999, it would say that there's invalid heading, and so very useful for that. Moving on over, there's a Raven equipment test here. This is used for the loopback testing. If you go to this screen here, and put on the loopback tester onto the WPI or the PPI circular connector, and then start the test, then you can determine if all the Raven equipment is working or not. And moving over to here, if you want to log a raw AIS file, you can do it right here. And the file name will be the time and the date and _AIS.log, and that will go into the load directory of the dataset. Here you could replay a log that you logged up here. And down here is an event logging, typically not turned on. And it logged things like AIS messages that you couldn't decode and so forth. And then if you have a BPI, you could either have a BPI or a WPI, or you could be just hardwired via serial port. But if you have a BPI, the battery parameters will be here. And then wiring state, the MAC address of the BPI, the firmware version, the hardware version, and the checksum of the BPI are all right here. This box, if you check it, will dim the LEDs on the BPI, and by default this check is on. So if you wanted to brighten the LEDs on the BPI, you would uncheck this box. Finally, this box here is the communications state and or status, and right now it's showing opened COM49, which is a Bluetooth COM port. So that's it for the AIS client main screen.